It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Day one of the hearings. We saw the faces, we heard the stories of Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn and Sergeant Aguino Ganell. We also heard the stories of Metro D.C. police officers Michael Fanone and Daniel Hodges, and they were exactly what we were expecting. Horrific. They were exactly what I was expecting to come out of it. Stories of homegrown terror, of terrorists with a sense of entitlement, pumped up and pushed at these police officers while simultaneously wearing the colors of Back the Blue and waving the American flag. Really just a disgraceful day that should never be forgotten in our country's history, January 6th. And I'm glad these officers got to tell their stories. I'm hoping people listened. I really am. I'm hoping that they felt the kind of anger and the kind of, I don't really even have the word for it, for the people who perpetrated this, for those criminals, those terrorists on that day. I can't help think of what those cops felt on that day. Because understand, they started the day thinking, this is the Trump crowd. These are the people who, they're our people. They're the people who say how much they love us, how much they embrace us, only to have them turn on you like that. One of there are a couple of clips that caught my attention. One of them extremely powerful is that of DC Metro Police Officer Michael Fanone, and I just want to play that clip. Here's Michael Fanone.
During the assault, I thought about using my firearm on my attackers, but I knew that if I did, I would be quickly overwhelmed, and that in their minds would provide them with the justification for killing me. So I instead decided to appeal to any humanity they might have. I said as loud as I could manage, "I've got kids." Thankfully, some in the crowd stepped in and assisted me. Those few individuals protected me from a crowd and inched me toward the Capitol until my fellow officers could rescue me. I was carried back inside. What happened afterwards is much less vivid. I had been beaten unconscious and remained so for more than 4 minutes. I know that Jimmy helped to evacuate me from the building and drove me to MedStar Washington Hospital Center, despite suffering significant injuries himself. At the hospital, doctors told me that I had suffered a heart attack, and I was later diagnosed with a concussion, a traumatic brain injury, and post-traumatic stress disorder. As my physical injuries gradually subsided and the adrenaline that had stayed with me for weeks waned, I've been left with the psychological trauma and the emotional anxiety of having survived such a horrific event. And my children continue to deal with the trauma of nearly losing their dad that day. What makes the struggle harder and more painful is to know so many of my fellow citizens, including so many of the people I put my life at risk to defend, are downplaying or outright denying what happened. I feel like I went to hell and back to protect them and the people in this room. But too many are now telling me that hell doesn't exist, or that hell actually wasn't that bad. The indifference shown to my colleagues is disgraceful.
Disgraceful. I can think of a lot more harsh words. But remember, the people who did this, just tourists, just like any other day. And as he pointed out, the people who have downplayed this, it was like any other day. It was just tourists. They stayed between the ropes, except for when they were crushing this guy between, when they were tasing him 11 times or more in the base of his skull, while they were crushing the other police officer, while they were calling racial names to the others. And what's interesting, you can't find a single Republican. You can't find a single Republican who said that they watched the hearings outside of the ones that were on the panel. They were too busy. They were too busy having meetings. They were too busy. I love McConnell's thing, doing the hard work of the American people. You're too busy hiding in the closet with their corporate donors or hiding from anyone to hold them accountable, unless they were having their sideshows. One Republican who everyone is calling, kind of a hero, and look, I don't give people the hero title easily. I don't think Adam Kinzinger is a hero. I think he's doing his job. Good on him. This is what we should expect from statesmen. This is what we should expect from our elected leaders. But Representative Kinzinger, and I guess for me, kind of the emotion that went into it. Here's Representative Kinzinger's emotional discussion.
Expected today to be quite as emotional for me as it has been. I've talked to a number of you and gotten to know you. I think it's important to tell you right now, though, you guys may individually feel a little broken. You guys all talk about the effects you have to deal with, and you talk about the impact of that day. But you guys won. You guys held. Democracies are not defined by our bad days. We're defined by how we come back from bad days, how we take accountability for that. And for all the overheated rhetoric surrounding this committee, our mission is very simple. Let's define the truth, and it's to ensure accountability. I never expected today to be
accountability. I mean, and that's the part that I find interesting about all this. Somebody has to be held accountable. Not the folks who are out on the Capitol lawn pointing fingers somewhere else. Again, today for the Republican Party as a whole, outside of Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, was all about blaming Nancy Pelosi. That was the thing. Everyone was, Nancy Pelosi, she was the Speaker of the House. Yet never said anything about Mitch McConnell, who was the majority leader. Nothing. Nothing about because understand, the Capitol Police are overseen by both parties. This was going to be an interesting argument. And look, Nancy Pelosi is the target of the right and always has been. And I'm not sure if it's just the misogyny or the hatred of Democrats or both. But that's where they've gone. Now, Republicans had a little shindig. They, again, as I said, pointed out that their belief it was all Nancy Pelosi's fault. Wasn't the former guy's fault. No, wasn't that at all. It was solely Nancy Pelosi's fault. All of this. That's their argument right now. So the stories you heard today of the 4 police officers being crushed, being tased, being beaten, all of those things. Forget that. That's what the right wants you to believe. That's what, I listened to right-wing talk radio today. They weren't even really paying attention to it because it's all Nancy Pelosi. You have Elise Stefanik, the representative from New York. Elise thought it was a great opportunity today to, one, blame Nancy Pelosi, because that's what she had to say. But more importantly, she thought today would be a good day to raise money. So in her tweet, she says, "Help us fire the authoritarian Nancy Pelosi. One team, save America. Donate to our effort to take back the House. And then, of course, a link for money. So while we're listening to testimony of these four heroes being crushed and beaten and tased and probably broken for life now, worse than when the one guy said worse than when he was in Iraq. At least Stefanik and the Republicans are raising money. And it's one of these things where I can't imagine, and I go back to what I said earlier, I can't imagine what the people that protected these representatives, the people like these four officers who put their lives on the line to protect these representatives. And they did. Because I believe on that day, had that mob gotten a hold of anyone in Congress, anyone, even the beloved Republicans, they probably would have killed somebody. They were out for blood. They had been ramped up. They had been geared up. They had been riled up. They had been pointed in the direction, and they had been told that that's their right. It's their house. It's their ability. They run things, and everyone is answerable to the mob. They had the gallows built. They were screaming about how they're gonna hang Mike Pence and others. These are, in the word, terrorists. And Officer Hodges used that word and defined that word because that's what those people were. They were terrorists. And the thing that gets me is I understand anger. I understand the difficulties that people have. And Donald Trump was able to do something back in 2015 and 2016. And I was commentating on this back when it was going on. That he has touched a nerve. He's hit the pulse of the working class of this country, an angry working class that have diminished opportunities, that the life that they were told was their birthright, that they were going to do better than their parents. They were going to live the American dream. They were going to 40 years and a gold watch and a solid retirement, and they were going to have dignity and respect and all of these things, only to, for many, not. And one of the things that I've been saying for a long time is, if you want to continue to see the kind of mass mob mobilization that someone like Trump can do, continue to have the massive economic inequality that we have, the massive economic insecurity we have, the massive poverty that we have in the working class across this country. Continue to have that, because that's what's going to continue to create these mobs of people who feel entitled. Because look, every one of those white faces out there, and they were pretty clear, the testimony today, so there was a couple of Asian guys, maybe a couple of women here or there, but mostly angry white guys. Until we have that portion of the American dream that I grew up believing possible, we're going to continue to have these moments. Economic opportunity is a national security issue, and we saw it on display. But beyond that, and this is where the frustration comes, the faces that we saw there, the ones who were well organized, the white supremacists, the white nationalists, for them it wasn't about economic opportunity. It wasn't for the economic insecurity. It's the rest of the people who were in that crowd with them. And I'm hoping this is a moment where, having this hearing these officers, we can maybe reach some of those people. Look, the white nationalists and the American Nazi Party, we're not going to reach them. They're fives. You leave them alone. But the people who heard that Trump message that he's going to rebuild that 50s economy of good, strong union jobs and families being able to live on one income and those things that our grandparents built, I hope this reaches them. We're never getting the extreme. They saw this as an opportunity to tear everything down and to control things for themselves and, well, attack the future of this country. And my problem with this is you have a political party in this country, sans two. And I think it showed yesterday with the vote. It showed again today, where you have the Republicans pulling out of another committee, a key select committee. That it's not for them about the economy. It's not for making people's lives better. It's not for making America the best we can be. It's about their narrow self-interest. It's about their narrow vision of what this country should look like. And when none of Kevin McCarthy's appointments for this select committee on economic disparity and fairness and growth refused to join the committee, is our government completely broken now? And is it what happened on January 6th that has torn us completely apart because of the former guy? Now, look, over the next couple of weeks, I want to hear more stories of the people who lived through that horrific day. But more importantly, I want to go after the people who funded it. I want the people who organized, who encouraged, who made it all possible and paid for it. For me, those are the people that we have to go after, not the people who bought into their lives are less than it should be because some minority group had an opportunity, or because women have an opportunity, or whatever in their twisted little mind is out there. I want the people who duped these folks. I want the people who brought these people along, and it's not just here at home either. It's across the globe. So I'm hoping a lot from this committee. Sadly, as I said yesterday, I don't know that a lot's going to happen, but I'm hopeful. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1877. That was the day striking railroad workers in Chicago clashed with police in the Battle of the Halsted Street Viaduct. The Great Railroad Strike had reached the nation's railroad hub and began there 3 days earlier. Switchmen from the Michigan Central traveled to freight shops in yards across the city, calling workers out to strike. Soon, lumber shovers, butchers, and industrial workers joined the strike. By the time the battle began, police had already clashed with unarmed strikers twice. Historian Richard Schneveroff describes the scene leading up to the battle. The city was now preparing itself for a full-scale insurrection, even though violent confrontations were rooted in police attacks on non-violent crowds. Previous confrontations centered in the railroad yards. Now, striker actions spilled over into the neighborhood of Pilsen, where they live. Thousands gathered along Halsted Street between 12th and 16th Streets. The police arrived attempting to disperse the crowd. They chased the strikers south and, as Schneveroff describes, emptied their revolvers into the masses of humanity. The crowd pelted the police with stones in defense and chased them over the viaduct. As word spread of the pitched battle, stockyard workers from nearby Bridgeport walked off the job. They marched along Halsted Street with butcher knives in hand to support the strikers under attack. The crowd on Halsted swelled to more than 10,000 as workers continued to battle police. By evening, 30 workers had been shot dead. Hundreds more were seriously wounded. But the strike continued to spread more fiercely. Streetcar stockmen, stone cutters, gas workers, glass cutters, and others joined the the strike. The city was shut down for another week until railroad bosses finally rescinded wage cuts. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
New poll out, 9 battleground states across the country. What they found really extremely strong support for the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, or the PRO Act. In fact, overall in the 9 battleground states, 69% were in favor of the PRO Act, just 20% opposed. My state, where I live now in Pennsylvania, number one, 76% of the folks they polled in Pennsylvania in favor of getting the PRO Act passed, followed by Alaska at 72%, Wisconsin 71%, Virginia 70%. Hey, Virginia, how about undoing your no rights at work law? And Ohio at 65%. Overwhelmingly popular. People want to be able to join and form unions. People want to be able to bargain with their bosses for better wages, hours, and conditions. Problem is, we've had a broken political system for far too long that many Republicans have figured out how to screw up. And this is why I come back to what we saw on January 6th. The anger that Trump was able to tap into goes right back to the fact that we've allowed unions to get broken up. And here to share some thoughts on how we get this PRO Act passed, how we revive the American dream, how we revive that opportunity, that meritocracy that we were led to believe. I've asked Mark Fluharty to come talk with us. Mark is the executive director of the Central Ohio Labor Council. Mark, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, Rick, I'm glad to be here.
So I'm looking at this poll that just come out. I'll tell you, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that 76% of the people that they polled here in Pennsylvania think we should have strong labor unions for workers to benefit when companies do well. I'm not surprised at it at all.
Well, Rick, let me just share a quick story about union organizing that I just testified in front of Columbus City Council last night about. So last November, the workers at Habitat for Humanity here in Columbus decided that they wanted to organize a union, right? So Workers United comes to town. They get a campaign going, and Habitat for Humanity does a lot of great work in the community, as we all know. But they're a horrible employer. Their people make $15 an hour, and they wanted to do collective bargaining, have some say-so in their work. Company brings in anti-union lawyer, fire a couple of the union supporters, and here's people scrapping by making $15 an hour while the CEO makes $324,000 a year, right? So yeah, we need some change in labor law. Rick, you just pointed out that Virginia, right to work state, right? 1947 is the last year that we have any type of labor law reform. In 1947, we get the Taft-Hartley Act, which, creates right to work and sends a downward spiral in the South in wages and unionizing. If you look at the states that are mostly right to work, they're southern states. What happened in the North? Good jobs went down to the South, right? Well, now the good jobs that went down to the South are now going down to Mexico, or they're going overseas. So, the right to organize was given to us in 1932. It's what built the middle class. My father, my grandparents were union workers. I grew up in a union household. I've always had great union health care. I've always made good union wages. I was able to retire because I have a union pension. And our young people today are wanting the same thing. Unions are as popular now amongst young people as they've ever been, over 70%.
Right.
Would say they'd join a union if they could.
Yep.
But just my example, with Habitat for Humanity, there's the roadblocks.
No, and we saw that on full display with the Amazon campaign down in Bessemer, Alabama. And I'm glad that got the kind of attention that it deserved, because what Amazon did wasn't unusual in organizing campaigns. They did all of the things that the union busting firms do. They did it all out in front for everyone to see. And I'm glad people saw that, because I think that the more we see how these things happen, the more we see the desperation that employees feel, the fear that they feel, the harassment that they're put through, the more I think things like the PRO Act will remain popular and get even more so popular.
Yeah, absolutely. People are struggling now, and you see it all across the country in the fight for, 15. Well, now it's fight even for like 17 and above. People are struggling. We got people working 2 or 3 jobs. We got people that can't afford housing. We've got a hunger problem in this country. And the wealth in this country is not getting down to the people that make it, the workers.
Right. No,
we were told. It's obvious.
We were told, Mark, that we just give Jeff Bezos all the money. Eventually, it'll trickle down to us. When he shot up into space, something would come trickling down on us. It just never seems to actually happen. The rivers of gold and honey that we were promised, it's yellow, all right, but it ain't gold and honey.
Well, Jeff, I graduated high school in 1981. I'm still waiting on Ronald Reagan's trickle down to get to me. Still haven't seen it yet.
If we just do more of it, I'm told. If we just do a little bit more, we give the rich a little bit more, we cut taxes on corporations a little bit more. Just do it a little bit more, Mark. Eventually the greedy get full. Eventually their pockets are full, and something will then spill out for you and I to fight over.
Well, I'm still waiting on that to happen, Jeff. I don't think that the greedy ever get full, and I don't think they ever think they have their fair share. And I don't think they can ever tell you that, when is enough enough. When you have the Walton family of Walmart, the race to the bottom of Amazon and their workers, we're not getting full. We're not getting a trickle down. What we're getting is people working 2 or 3 jobs to make a living.
So let me ask you this.
Go ahead.
The PRO Act, I'm a supporter. I was a supporter of the Employee Free Choice Act. I said that was too weak back during the Obama years. In fact, my wife's going to roll her eyes here in a second. I shook Barack Obama's hand twice. I asked him, are we going to get the Employee Free Choice Act? And both times he said we were going to get something better. We got nothing. I look at the PRO Act and I say, this is good. Lots of steps in the right direction. For me, I just want a full repeal of Taft-Hartley and go back to the original intent of the National Labor Relations Act, which is me being able to join and form a union with my coworkers without interference from the employers. But that's a whole nother thing. This PRO Act, tell me what's in it. Tell me how we get to the point where it gets passed. And do you see a way of going through the regular channels of passing legislation? Or is this a budget reconciliation thing? There's a lot there, but I'm going to give you a chance.
The PRO Act and the reform that it brings to the table are long overdue. What the PRO Act does is really levels the playing field for workers to freely join a union without fear of harassment and intimidation from their employer. It opens the door for collective bargaining. A lot of people don't know that, even if you can join a union, you can hold workers enough together, fight through an anti-union campaign, and get the unit certified, that you only have a year to get a first contract.
Right.
If you don't have that year, if you don't get that first contract, you may be starting all over. The PRO Act takes care of that, right? It gives you an avenue to get a first contract. So, this is the biggest labor law reform in my lifetime, and it's tough. It was tough back in the Employee Free Choice Act. I went to Washington myself to lobby. I was there when Tom Harkin come out and told us, guys, you've done a hell of a job, but guess what? It's not going to happen because we're going to focus on healthcare. And I do know that we do have a pro-union president now, probably the greatest pro-union president since FDR. And is it going to be easy? No, I've been doing things all year at the Labor Council here in the labor movement to put pressure on our senators to do the right thing. But here in Ohio, we have Rob Portman, right? So Rob Portman is about as anti-labor as anybody is. And he's pretty much told us all that, raise all the hell you want. I'm not going to change my mind. So, we got to look outside the box and see where we can influence other senators to get to the 60.
Right.
We might be lucky enough to get some things through reconciliation, what will go through. I'm not really hopeful. And I was having a discussion today with several of the elected officials around town. We're in a ball back and forth type of situation between each president. So here comes, Bill Clinton, and he uses executive orders to change the labor board, do some favorable laws. George Bush comes along and undoes. So here comes Obama. He gets a better board. Here comes Trump along, and he crushes it. So now we have Joe. And what my point is that the worker is the one that's suffering, right?
Yep.
And we all know, it's proven. CEO pay is over 500% of what the average worker makes in this country. That's what this is causing.
Now, for me, I don't see the whole piece of legislation going through. I have some friends, in labor who are saying, no, we're gonna force Republicans to vote for it. We're gonna get to the 60 votes. We're gonna get it through. I don't see that possible. There are some things that we can do through budget reconciliation that I think could be helpful. One of those things is increasing fines on employers who break the rules and violate the law and do things that are outside the bounds. I think that would be helpful. I don't know how helpful. So I'm curious if that was what we would get, because that's the economic part of this. Would that be helpful to you as an organizer?
Well, it most certainly couldn't help, Rick. And let's just use quickly immigration and illegal immigration, right? So it's exploited in the country, and you can go to about any meat processing plant, food processing plant around the country. Matter of fact, I just had one down in Mississippi last year. There's no real disincentive not to hire illegal immigrants, right? Because the fine is just ridiculously low. So same thing here. Now, if they're going to make the fine significant enough to get employers' attention, yeah, it most certainly can help. Anything can help. But if I had my wish, I can live with the election system, most certainly. If I could just get the employers to stay out and some type of guarantee for a first contract, those two things could change the working system for men and women in this country.
Yeah, basically what you're looking at is what you're talking about is what the Employee Free Choice Act had done. There was a time frame for a first contract arbitration. There was triple the penalties for anything. Any worker who was fired, they would have to reimburse them triple. Because as you know better than anyone, if an employer like Amazon fires someone, and that person goes out and gets a job and makes the same amount of money, even if that guy gets his job back, Amazon doesn't have to pay anything because the guy didn't really lose any wages. So there's no disincentive for them not to fire people and put their thumb on it. And also there was the card check part of it. When you get enough cards signed, the unit's recognized. I think those things would be helpful. I would take that at this moment.
Yes, I would most certainly take that. That is definitely a step in the right direction. This is probably the last time, Rick, in our lifetime where the cards are going to line up that we may be able to really get something done.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for this moment for over 30 years. And I'm doing everything I can in my local community, in my city here in Columbus, Ohio, in my state of Ohio, with my elected officials to lobby, to put pressure. I encourage all working people. This benefits everybody, not just union workers. And we all know the higher union density that we have in this country, that raises everybody's wages up. People are more likely to own a home if they're in a union. Minorities are more likely to have a living wage, have health care. God forbid, even talking about retirement. So, a better, higher union density is just good for everybody.
No, I'm right there with you. And look, we're right about the same age. And, I say the same thing. I've worked my entire adult working life to try and give my children and future generations the opportunities that I've had. And I think this is our opportunity to pass something positive along and give them opportunities that we had. And I fear that if we lose this moment, and I hate being the doomsday guy, but I see things getting much worse for workers in this country.
Yeah, this is, I think, really a make or break point for the American labor movement. We've been just treading water most of my working career over the last 30 years. I've been in union leadership almost that whole time. We've been treading water. We can't keep up with the amount of people that really need to be organized. And just a couple facts. I mean, between 1948 and 1973, right? The New Deal laws get expanded and collective bargaining is enforced. Hourly rate wages rose by more than 90%. All right. But then over the next 40 years, from 73 to 2013, hourly wages just over 9%. That's real numbers. What's happening, and the pandemic showed it to everybody. The rich are just getting richer at our expense.
Yep.
We're making it for them, and we're not sharing in it.
No, you're absolutely right. And in fact, during that time, 73 to 13, what you also found is the wage of the top 1%, our CEO class, went up almost 1,000%. So there's a huge difference in who got what. And it comes back to policy. Policy did this to us. Policy can undo it. And for me, something like the PRO Act would get us in the right direction. So last question I've got for you: how do we get people on board? How do we get people to push and call senators and do all that stuff?
Well, I tell you, Rick, here in Ohio, we've been working our tails off to do that very thing. We've had 2 weeks of action, one in April, and matter of fact, just concluded one. And as a matter of fact, Labor Day weekend is going to be another push. So what I would tell everybody, whether you're union or not, is to look at your local labor council. Everybody has one, and, get involved. Call your senator. Call Rob Portman, call the senator in your state, put the pressure on them. It's going to take all of us to do it. It can be done, but we're going to have to be aggressive, and we're going to have to be forceful, and we're going to have to stick together.
I'm right there with you, Mark. Mark, I appreciate the time. Great talking with you. I hope you'll come back and share some more as this continues, something not going to go away anytime soon. Mark Fluharty, thanks so much for your time.
Hey, Rick, thanks a lot. I would love to come back.
Beautiful. Good stuff. For more information, if you want to check out more about the PRO Act, aflcio.org, the website. You can also check out Mark's website, centralohiolaborcouncil.org. We'll get links out on social media. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1990. That was the day that George H.W. Bush signed into law the Americans with Disabilities Act. The ADA prohibits employment discrimination of people with disabilities and requires public accommodations to be accessible. The passage of the act was the result of years of grassroots organizing by members of the ADA community and their allies. When President Bush signed the law, he said that if he had to thank everyone who had been involved, we'd never get out of here before sunset. The passage of the act had bipartisan support, but many business leaders worried about the ADA's effect, fearing the costs of accessibility accommodations to their bottom lines. While most business leaders did not oppose the act outright, they did push for amendments and concessions to weaken its impact. The business newspaper, The Wall Street Journal, called the act, quote, the Lawyers' Employment Act, warning that a flood of lawsuits on disability issues would harm businesses. In signing the bill, President Bush addressed business leaders specifically. He said, quote, "You've called for new sources of workers. Well, many of our fellow citizens with disabilities are unemployed. They want to work, and they can work. And this is a tremendous pool of people. And remember, this is a tremendous pool of people who will bring to jobs diversity, loyalty, proven low turnover rate, and only one request: the chance to prove themselves. The passage of the ADA paved the way for fundamental changes in America's infrastructure, such as accessibility ramps, spots for wheelchairs on buses and subways, and parking accommodations. This was a major step forward, yet more work remains in order to build a society truly accessible to all. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Over the weekend, the Chinese Communist government, not happy with NBC Universal. Evidently, NBC didn't show the Chinese Communist government approved map of China. They called it an incomplete map. They were very angry. Said that NBC Universal had, slighted the Chinese people, had hurt the dignity and emotions of the Chinese people. Is exactly how they put it. They say they urge NBC to recognize the serious nature of this problem and take measures to correct the error. As far as I remember, now look, I was watching some of the Olympics. Didn't Taiwan have a team? So how can you include Taiwan in the Chinese map when Taiwan's actually competing? Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, this egregious error. And what position NBC was really in. I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to come talk with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, the website. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it is always great to be with you, and I'm happy to talk about the Olympics, one of my favorite topics.
So NBC hurt the dignity and the emotions of the Chinese people by not including Taiwan in the Chinese map. Why is this a big deal to the Chinese?
Yeah, I think the Chinese Communist Party in particular is overly sensitive to this because they have a narrative. In their minds, it's the only narrative. And if they cannot persuade people or corporations or governments to adhere to that narrative, they bully, they punish, they threaten. And this is the latest in a string of incidents like this. One of the airlines, Delta, I think, was chided because of the way in which it referred to Taiwan on a map and in written communication. In the opening ceremonies, broadcasters got chided by the Chinese government for referring to Taiwan and Hong Kong not as Chinese Taipei or Chinese Hong Kong. And it was very upsetting to them. Incredibly overly sensitive to this. And just, it's not in the Olympic spirit, I would say. I know Taiwan has an Olympic team because I saw a couple of weightlifters do really well today. Doing perfectly fine. Yeah.
So, because I don't remember this being a thing in past Olympics. Is this new?
I'm trying to think of a way to put this. It's always been a thing, just kind of both the terminology, but there is also an incredibly increased sensitivity to this. And the Chinese Communist Party and Xi Jinping in particular are really kind of sowing their oats on this. I mean, they feel more powerful than ever, and like they can, they expect others, and again, people, corporations, governments, to adhere to that line, or they're going to be faced with sanction or bullying or intimidation. And there could be financial consequences to that as well. So it doesn't put anybody in a particularly great spot who is willing to kind of just say the truth about this, or to push the Chinese Communist Party away.
Yeah. Now, the reason I bring this up is it appears to me, and I understand that they've always viewed Taiwan as attached to them, and we've always viewed them as an independent sovereign state. I kind of get that, but this is the first time where they've really made a big deal about it, I think, that I've noticed. And to me, we're seeing them become much more aggressive, much more muscular in foreign policy, which makes me start going, we better start ramping up our own ability to produce things. We better start clawing back some of our production capabilities because they see themselves as, well, the dominant force in the 21st century.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Biden administration early on captured the challenge of China and dealing with its government very completely. Which, when they said, when we can cooperate, we will. When we must challenge them, we'll do that. And when we need to confront them, if it comes to that, we're going to have to do that, and we're going to have to be ready for that, and go into it with clear eyes and determination. But Rick, to your point, yeah, it does not make sense, particularly, and I'm just going to use clean energy as an example here. If we're trying to scale up a clean energy economy in this country, you need lithium-ion batteries. And lithium-ion batteries, 70% of the world's supply comes from China right now. So that doesn't bode well for independent clean energy economy in the United States. We need to make sure that we are scaling it up here in the United States, and that we are also ensuring that our producers don't get swamped by the subsidies and unfair trade practices of Chinese companies and the Chinese government.
Yeah. Now, you guys have put out a video on why the Biden administration must keep the Section 232 trade actions in place, because we're in a stand up for steel moment. Because look, if you don't have the bare resources, the raw resources to create the things that we need, as we're talking about rebuilding our infrastructure, you're going to be dependent on someone else. And well, that didn't go well during the pandemic. So how is this trade action, this Section 232 trade action, going to help save our steel industry and make it strong to compete in the future?
Yeah, so there are 25% tariffs on some imported steel, including steel from China and European countries and Japan and many other places in the world. And they were put into place to ensure that more steel companies didn't go bankrupt. I mean, you know well, Rick, in Pennsylvania, what has happened throughout the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, and some of the blast furnace closures and other things that were happening again.
Yeah, I grew up in Cleveland. Same thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. So so the issue is that China's steel industry is so big, it produces about 55% of the world's steel, and most of its big companies are owned by the Chinese government, the Chinese Communist Party, that if they decide to distort the market, it impacts steel producers here and around the world. And so we need to make sure that we're producing more of our own steel here at home, that we're giving our workers an opportunity to do that, and that we aren't getting undercut by unfair competition. And I would like to do this 1,000 other different ways than to have 25% tariffs, but that's what we have to have, because there is no better solution at this point in time. It's allowing our steel industry to invest in the future and to stay solvent and hopefully to thrive. And we want to see that continue on into the future. I think that's a good thing.
I'm right there with you. And I look at this, and in your video, you pointed out that this is a national security issue and an economic security issue.
Right. That's right. Aircraft carriers, constructed from armor plate steel and other kinds of steel. Even we were talking about the clean energy economy. Even a solar panel farm, a solar farm, has thousands of tons of steel in it, and so we're going to depend on this as we head into the future. And we may be in a digital economy in many ways, but the world around us is still built out of things like steel, and we need to make it here at home. And we're not going to be able to do that if our steel makers, our steel workers are undercut by Chinese competition. And here's the deal, and here's the rub, I guess, is that the Europeans desperately want these tariffs off of them. And I think it's fair to say, for the Biden administration to say to Europe, well, what have you done for us? Are you going to stand up to China? Are you going to stop dumping? There are 40 anti-dumping orders in place against European metal right now. And so, we need you to do a better job as well. Then we can talk about it. But until then, we got to keep the tariffs in place.
Yeah. Now, I've had people tell me that that I'm an isolationist because I call for these kind of protective things. And I say, no, I'm a protectionist. When I leave my house, I lock the door. I'm not an isolationist. I didn't dig a big moat with alligators and a drawbridge, but I do protect things. And this is one of those things. We need the capacity to produce steel. There's no way around that. So we do need to protect what industry we have and help promote and make it stronger. And to me, this just makes sense.
Some wise man once said, you're not going to win the next World War by flipping burgers at McDonald's or clicking a button for Amazon. It takes metal and lots of it. It takes know-how too. But that's why you want to have that capability to produce steel in the United States. And not only that, as you mentioned, good paying jobs, middle-class jobs, particularly for workers who don't have a 4-year college degree, and helps to meet our climate goals. Put simply, when we produce steel here, there's less carbon output than we're seeing in steel from China and many other places around the world as well. So we're doing the environment and greenhouse gas emissions a favor as well by keeping that production here in the United States.
Yeah, we need the capacity to make our own steel, but also the sophisticated stuff. I mean, I saw a story today that said, there's a single company in Taiwan that makes almost all of the world's most sophisticated chips, the ones that are going to run our smart things and communicate with everything. We don't make hardly any of those. And how are you going to compete in the 21st century digital economy when you can't create the infrastructure that it takes to do that?
Yeah, having one company or place or human that has a particular set of know-how or kind of a monopoly on production is not good for anybody. And so we definitely need to see that diversification. The United States makes about 12% of the world's semiconductors right now. We consume a lot more than that, but we produce about 12%. We used to produce about 30% of the world's semiconductors. And so, the Senate, the USICA bill, Innovation Competition Act, it was passed. I'd like to see that move forward in the House of Representatives to boost up our semiconductor funding. And I think this is important. And again, I'm going to go back to China here. We know that 40% of the planned semiconductor capacity expansions are in China. And so we don't want to be more dependent on China. We want to be less dependent on China. And so that's why we need an industrial policy that's going to get those semiconductors and other critical products built here at home so that we can have that sense of security. I'm with you. We're not isolationist. We want to trade with the rest of the world. We'll still be importing semiconductors even after that. But we got to do better about making some of that stuff here, Rick.
Yeah, I've been saying for years, there's evidently again, this is way above my pay grade, but evidently there's a chip that goes in that makes our smart bombs smart. That one of the only places in the world that they make it is in China. And I'm going, explain to me why we want to have chips that make our smart bombs smart, made by an adversary. Look, I don't know an awful lot about chips, but I don't know. Can you put other codes in there? Can you figure out how to get those things to turn around? I don't know. I don't feel safe having an adversary doing things at that level. Just my paranoia.
Right. Well, believe me, the Defense Department, security, intelligence agencies have gamed out those scenarios, and it is not a far-fetched fiction to think that could happen. It is quite possible to see that. I mean, obviously, there's a different level of sophistication when you're talking about military equipment, but it's super easy to hack into autonomous vehicles. And so you're absolutely right. We need to be darn sure that the electronic equipment, that those chips, that everything is secure, that we can depend on it, and that we don't have to worry about it being hacked or manipulated, or just put simply some supply coming from China that they could just turn off the spigot at any time if they're unhappy about the way that we're coloring the map.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, we saw that, with masks and protective gear during the pandemic. And I'm like, did we learn nothing from this? And this is why I keep coming back to, I remember going into Trenton, New Jersey, where there's this great bridge that said, Trenton takes the world, or Trenton makes the world takes. That used to be the reality of this country. We were the productive country for decades. Now we've lost that manufacturing prowess. it's time to get that back because, look, if we're going to rebuild our infrastructure, if we're going to move to the 21st century, we have to have the capacity to do it. Because, look, we're talking about a big infrastructure bill. Is it going to help us rebuild our economy and our country or the Chinese?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's important. And infrastructure is one of those pieces, along with the industrial policy that I talked about earlier, and we talked about trade. But having that investment in infrastructure, broadband, electrical grid, physical infrastructure is going to be key. It's going to be key for jobs, key for competitiveness, all of that. And, you know, the Senate, God bless the bipartisan group trying to reach an agreement. I hope they do. I hope they get this across the finish line. But we can't wait forever. We have to get this done. We have a window of opportunity, and this is going to help bridges, broadband, water, electrical grid in every state, red and blue. So it's time to move this forward. I'm hopeful that we can do this with broad bipartisan support because Lord knows voters think it's a great idea across the board. But we have to get Washington to act, and we have to do it soon.
Yeah.
And so I certainly understand the frustration that many House Democrats and others have with this bipartisan process. It's got to come to a close. But we got to get a deal made here, and we got to move on. We got to get something passed.
No, I'm right there with you. And if you can't get it, you got to push it through budget reconciliation because we need to get something done. If nothing happens this time around, and this is one of those things where red, blue doesn't matter. If we get nothing done again, because we just lived through 4 years of nothing getting done, the Chinese get that much further ahead in this race. Because I don't know if you're seeing the stories that I'm seeing. They're investing heavily in their infrastructure. Yeah. They're investing heavily in the new technologies of the next generation, while we're mired in this infighting over the former guy.
Yeah, we're so far behind with all of that, just because we've starved our public works. We really have. And we're resting on the laurels of the interstate highway system and the New Deal. They were great, but they're not getting any younger. And so it's time for that next generation of great things. Other nations have leaped ahead of us with that. Not only China, but other nations as well. It's time that we reclaim that mantelpiece of being global leaders as we look at this next generation of infrastructure, which is a smart grid, which is 5G and broadband, which is this interconnectivity. We have to do a better job of this. And it starts with a major federal investment that's going to look out for workers here in the United States. We got to get it done, Rick. We're committed to doing that.
No, and that's one of those things. Call your senators, call your House members, early, call them often. We need to be competitive around the world. And look, if there's one thing that I think can pull us all together, it's that we need to be competitive with China because, they're going to eat our lunch. I hope folks will check out the website, Alliance for American Manufacturing.org. We'll get links out on social media how folks can check that out. But Scott, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff, good information. Look forward to talking to you again.
Likewise, Rick. Keep up the fight. Thanks for having me on.
Anytime. Good stuff. Our good friend Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, their website. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1775. That was the day the United States Post Office was created in Philadelphia under Benjamin Franklin. Franklin was a member of the Second Continental Congress. Among many other distinctions, Ben Franklin was named the nation's first Postmaster General. Franklin received a salary of $1,000, with an additional $340 for a secretary and comptroller. His responsibilities spanned all post offices from Massachusetts to Georgia, and he had the authority to hire additional postmasters as necessary. Previously, in 1753, Benjamin Franklin helped lead the postal service in the colonies. He made numerous improvements in the mail system, including setting up new, more efficient routes. He had also been able to cut delivery time in half between Philadelphia and New York by having weekly mail wagons travel both day and night via relay teams. In 1774, the British fired Franklin from his postmaster job because of his revolutionary activities. There have been postal unions dating back to the 19th century. Those early unions had essentially no bargaining rights. They existed largely as lobbying organizations that otherwise would have no say about their working conditions. Wage increases depended on the whim of Congress. On March 18, 1970, thousands of New York City postal workers walked off the job in protest. They were joined in the streets by 200,000 others in 30 major cities. Mail service ground to a halt, and the plight of postal workers was brought to the public's attention. The strike was soon settled, with Congress approving a 6% wage increase. The strike served as an impetus for the enactment of the Postal Reorganization Act of 1970, which granted unions the right to negotiate with management over their wages, benefits, and working conditions.
Our local newspapers are being merged, purged, shrunk, shut down, and looted by Wall Street profiteers. Yet, there's good news. In the towns those media vultures are torching, a phoenix is rising. Hundreds of determined locals, often led by people of color, are finding new ways to pay for and revive top-quality local journalism. For example, the Ferndale Enterprise moved to an old Victorian home, renting upstairs rooms to vacationers to subsidize the paper. Also, while aloof Wall Street owners have no connection to us or our towns, the scrappy new community papers are stressing their grassroots connection by moving into friendlier, more central, street-level spaces such as public libraries and community centers, so that regular people can see them and have direct access to their reporters and editors. Then there's the editor of the Sahan Journal in Minneapolis, who moves his weekly editorial meeting to the offices of various grassroots groups so their members can help shape the paper's coverage. And in Marfa, Texas, the Big Bend Sentinel is literally serving the public, not only with a good weekly, but also with the Sentinel, a combo coffee shop, cozy bar, cafe, event space, and hangout for locals to meet and greet. In ways big and small, dedicated local journalists are experimenting with funding, structure, staffing, etc. to produce the news that democracy requires. Note to Wall Street vultures, these newspaper ventures aren't interested in scaling up to maximize investor profits. As they know, it was corporate cost-cutting, consolidation, and scaling that got us into today's mess of journalistic collapse. And, unlike the Wall Street model, their success is not measured simply by financial return, but also by how they do at keeping citizens informed and engaged. This is Jim Hightower saying, now that's real journalism. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is made possible by you lowdowners who subscribe to our monthly newsletter, The Hightower Lowdown. You know who you are. Thank you.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, again, you go back to the testimony today, the 4 police officers and the stories, horrific stories. And look, as we talked about last week on the show, that this was going to be that moment where the heart-wrenching stuff, the anger stuff was going to come out, and it was powerful testimony today. It really was, and it's one of those things where I'm hoping that there were people paying attention and that it did change hearts and minds. And here to share some thoughts on what he thought of today's testimony. And look, is this going to move the needle? I've asked our good friend Scott Dworkin to come talk with us. Scott is the co-founder of the Democratic Coalition, also host of the fabulous Dworkin Report. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
I'm good. So let's start off. What were your impressions of what we saw today?
The words are hard. In a unique way, it was inspiring to see these 4 American heroes come out there and speak. It was heart-breaking, gut-wrenching, and it was tough to see the videos of them being assaulted, people trying to murder them, and then them talk about it. So I think that was just a perfect kind of explanation and way to present their arguments in regards to how serious this actually is. And I think that, today politics really didn't play a role. It was about America. And one of the sad truths about this whole escapade is that there's people in Congress right now that need to go to prison.
Now, you said this wasn't about politics, but yet I look at the Republicans who tried to hold their own alternative press conferences. In fact, Elise Stefanik came out and said it's all Nancy Pelosi's fault. It's all her fault. And then she went on to try and raise money off of this, which to me, I got to be honest, of all of the things that I heard, the most disgusting part of this is there is a politician in our government trying to raise money off of the worst, most horrible day, at least in this country, in my lifetime, and yet she's trying to raise money off of it.
Yeah, and she's being successful at it, raising money for herself and not for candidates that are across the country that will need her help. And so I think there's a lot of things obviously to unpack here, but think about it like this. You have Marge Green, Gosar, Gomer, and I'm going to forget who. Yeah, and so you have those four buffoons out there doing this press conference, and I was nervous. And of course, my close buddies showed up. Lauren Windsor and Kristen Mink and some other heroes came out there, and Lauren Windsor asked an honest question 15 times of Matt Gaetz. I think that it's spread on social media. I won't repeat it on here, but she asked a fair question. And then Kristen was holding a sign that I also won't repeat on here. But, the funny thing about this was they were all upset, acting like we were infringing on their rights and all this stuff. There were like a few people in this crowd, and they had some whistles and they had signs, and they did nothing that was like, and then they were just like, you're deafening my ears with like one of the whistles. And it's just not the case with that. And so it's just, I'm like, oh, wow. If they think that this whistle thing is like a lot, wait until they hear these stories from today's testimony. Everybody, if you're either playing two games, no Republican, unless they're condemning the acts and whatnot, no Republican is acting like McConnell and McCarthy both acted like they didn't watch it today, which is that's a complete and utter lie.
Right.
Like they absolutely watched every second of it. There's no way that they can't watch it. So, and they play this game every time. If they didn't watch it, which they did, but if they actually didn't, then like, what are they doing? Like,
the response was, we're doing the hard work of the American people. No, you're not. You're hiding in the corner with your lobbyists, if anything. But like you said, they're watching it because they want to try and discredit it. And I don't know that you can discredit the words that came out of those four cops' mouths. There's no way to discredit that.
Yeah, and they tried. They tried the what about? They tried to think of the attack, what they were doing at that press conference. It was an attack on those officers. It was an attack on all those officers. It was an attack on police officers across the country. They were going to think of it like this. If it were 9/11, they would be going to wherever they'd be housed, Guantanamo or elsewhere, and they'd be speaking outside of that in defense of them and saying, yes, I respect, the pilots that died and the heroes that were on the plane that tried to stop the terrorist attack. And I respect all the firefighters that died in 9/11, but, these are political prisoners. And it's like, you're just looking at yourself like, what are you even talking about? Like, that's what they were going there to do, is to muddy the water on things and defend terrorists who attacked and assaulted and tried to kill these police officers. And so I don't know how far off the deep end they'll go, but like, how much further can you go when you're attacking police officers who are protecting you every day and defending insurrectionists who committed a terrorist attack at the Capitol? And we're still unraveling everything from that. I mean, you have Mr. Mo Brooks, who is getting sued by Eric Swalwell, and today they made the announcement, the House Counsel made the announcement that he's not going to defend Mr. Brooks, so he's on his own. Same thing with Donald, where him and everyone who worked for him, the DOJ made it clear today that there is no reason for them not to testify in any part of this.
Right.
And use like executive privilege. There's no reason for them to use it because it's a campaign thing. So I mean, like the walls are closing in from every angle, and they're closing it quick. Now it's taken forever to get here, but I mean, we're going to be investigating at the level where it's not just testimony. I'm certain that they already have cell phone records of members of Congress in this congressional select committee. Like they're going to have all the data, they're going to have all the information, and you know, they're not going to announce every subpoena that they submit to data companies and things like that. So they're going to have information before then. And I could see this definitely bringing dozens of criminal referrals. This is where we're going to uncover the public sentiment that forces either resignations or indictments of public figures, people who are elected officials. Because at this point, I don't see a way for them to dig themselves out of it. Like,
yeah, but this is where you and I disagree on a lot of things. You know, I never thought the former guy was ever going to resign. I don't see a Republican ever resigning because their base doesn't care about what's going on, and they still, I think they still believe that their base is going to save them. So I don't see resignations coming. The only way I see that them being taken out of office is in handcuffs, perp walked, and put into jail.
Yeah, I mean, when I say resignations, I mean there's a situation that happens and maybe they're close to indictment, or there's some kind of criminal walls closing in, and then McCarthy would say, resign or I'm going to force you out of office. Like, and so they don't have a choice. So it's not really a resignation. It's a firing by a resignation. So it would not be something that they willingly do. I don't expect them to willingly do anything. They will stick it around as long as possible to grift off of their sad supporters, and it's really just pathetic. It's gonna get worse. Like they're already talking about acting like some of the heroes were not at the terrorists. So I mean, like and they're fundraising off of that as well. They're like, oh, they're calling us terrorists. Well, I mean, I can't just run around calling people terrorists. Like, you can't just do that. But legally, that's what they did. That's what they are. And so you can call them terrorists.
And Officer Hodges went through the definition of terrorism today and laid it right out. I mean, it was very clear. This is what these people are. They're terrorists.
They weren't white people. Thousands of people would have died that day. Well, actually, backtrack. Their doors would have been kicked in by the FBI before it even happened. You know what I mean? Like this is like a really white privilege on steroids, what happened that day. And they thought they were so entitled because Donald invited me here and I can break into this house and I can break your face. And I don't care if you have children. Oh, you have 4 girls. Well, maybe we'll let your partner drag you into the hallway calling for a medic because it was a war zone. You know what I mean? Like, this is not something that I've talked to a lot of police officers about this, even those that testified today, some of them. And it's absolutely heartbreaking to see over and over again the disrespect. And I was so happy to see the reality come in today. You have Officer Fanone, who sat there and slams his hand on the table because of the disrespect that they're being shown by lies and whatnot. And so, he was obviously angry. That was not planned, but it was just so pure. And you know, we hear some other folks trying to criticize it already, like, you know, theater actors kind of thing, and it's just not going to stick. You're right about that. There's just no way to really attack them in a way that's viable. And these are not going to be the only testimonies we hear. What's really going to be interesting is when we have Mark Meadows, possibly Mike Pence, and others. But this is not, from what I've heard as well, they're not going to allow long court battles, long subpoena battles. Keep in mind that the DOJ has their back on this. And so enforcing subpoenas will be very clear. And people will get arrested if they don't show up. So this is not a game. real people are back in control. If Trump were in the White House still, then I would believe that the DOJ would not take any action. Probably would have never indicted the insurrectionists, obviously.
Yeah, but I've taken the position. I don't think you're going to see a member of Congress testifying. You're not. I don't think we're going to see Mike Pence testifying.
I can guarantee you that we have. Yes, there will be members of Congress.
And
that
you think that the subpoena process is going to work fast enough as they challenge them to the courts to get them in the seats?
I think that they'll accept, and they won't. I think that they'll have a time frame where they have to accept by, and they know the road. They don't want to go down the road of having to get a subpoena. They want to act like they agreed to do it and that they were wanting to play ball. Because, think about it. They're going to sit down there. They're not going to be roasted by like Jamie Raskin. They're not going to be like grilling them. They're going to be asking information based on the facts that they've received, because the only reason that they're going to have them testify is that they have reason to do so.
Right.
So they got to have evidence to back that up.
See, because
need them to testify.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right, but I just don't see it. I don't see anyone putting themselves in that position under oath to have to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I'm just not seeing it. Especially as they're simultaneously trying to discredit the entire process as a partisan sham and a witch hunt. I don't see the Republicans. I just don't see it.
If you have partisan, it's America versus un-America.
I'm right there with you. We're the rest of us versus the terrorist party. I get that, but they're playing for their base. They're playing for the Fox News, OAN, all that crowd, and they think there's an alternative reality for them. I hope they do. Look, I want to get to the bottom of this more than anything. I want to hold accountable every one of these criminals. I want to build a wing on the San Quentin if we have to. And I like what Marjorie Taylor Greene said on Steve Bannon's podcast. She went on this rant about how Nancy Pelosi was on a witch hunt and there was a vendetta. She hates everybody. She wants to lock everybody up. She said that, Nancy Pelosi's warped in her thinking. She wants to put President Trump in jail. She wants to put Kevin McCarthy in jail. She'd like to put me in jail, Jim Jordan, Mo Brooks, Lauren Boebert. She wants to put us all in jail. And I go, yeah, if you broke the law, you should all go to jail.
Correct. And I think, I credit you with the skepticism, because it's important that people don't get their hopes up, and I've seen them get let down time and time again, obviously. Even people who get arrested, even people who plead guilty, all of a sudden, they're out of prison and they get a pardon. So I can see that this is a different ballgame. Like it's a different umpire. It's a different league, like a different set of rules. This is not Trump's DOJ. This is America's DOJ, and I think that, like, just based on what I'm seeing, like, there cannot be a select committee that's successful without Republicans, members of Congress testifying. It's just impossible, and they wouldn't have done it if they couldn't do that. So they have to, because they're accomplices, and they're going to need accomplices to testify. So yeah, some of them can protest, but you're talking about taking on Congress and the DOJ. You're going to lose that battle, lose it quick. This is something that is urgent. It's a terrorist attack, and if you're involved, then you're a terrorist as well. And we need to figure out who those people are. And if they don't, then they need to enforce the subpoenas and arrest them. Like that, it's really clear. Now, again, it would not have happened that way. That's why they never could really enforce subpoenas under Donald's rule. So now it's a different game. You have the back of the DOJ, and I think that they're obviously turning in the way where I think about it like this: they already indicted and they've arrested different Republican members of Congress over the last 4 years, and so I wouldn't be surprised if the FBI were to get out in front of some of this stuff. And you would want then, if you were arrested and you were a member of Congress and you were arrested for something linked to January 6th, you would want to then try and clear your name or make up for it by testifying in front of the committee. So there'll be some people, I think, that get in trouble that will then want to testify in front of the committee to try and clear it up with America, or, play that kind of game. But my hope is that a lot of these people come willingly. I really think, I know that every lawyer I've talked to would be like, I would not mess with this. This is not Trump's DOJ anymore. This is not fun for anybody. They can make it so that you're in deep trouble. There's different ways that you can enforce actions with fining people that don't want to come in. A lot of money, $25,000 a day, more, if it can be made up. And so they're not going to be able to play the same tricks and games. Now, what I've said is, don't even give them the time where you send a letter and you're like, respond by this date. Be like, I need you to respond by like tomorrow or this afternoon, or else you're going to get a subpoena. Some people you shouldn't even ask. Some people, don't waste the time. Don't waste the back and forth. Maybe say, hey, like, send me something back in an hour, or we're going to subpoena you.
So who do you do that to? Is that Marjorie Taylor Greene? Is that Gates? Is that Jordan? Who is that gets that now, or here's the subpoena?
Donald Trump. Like, he's the first person that he has to testify. Like, if he chooses not to testify, he should be that should be enforced. Like, that should be the main person. He is the Bin Laden of the January 6th terrorist attack.
Wow. So that's a statement. The former guy, the Bin Laden of this attack.
Absolutely. He was the architect of it, and he was the director of it, and he wanted it to happen. He allowed it to happen. Think about, if he didn't want this to happen, how loud he could have been real quickly. He wanted this to happen. He wanted people to die. He wanted reasons to stop this deal. You know what I mean? He wanted lawmakers to be murdered. He wanted a lot of people to be hurt, and then him declare martial law or something, anything that could extend time, anything that could slow down the vote or end the vote. I mean, he was willing to do anything. He let the Capitol be under attack. One of the loudest guys ever existed in the world sat there and let the Capitol get attacked by his own people because he wanted them to. Yeah. He incited them to. Every police officer today said the same thing. All of them said Trump invited them. And that's why they were there. And that's why Ashley Babbitt's dead. And that's why Brian Sicknick is dead. That's why the two other officers committed suicide. This is why 7 people died that day and the days after. So it's serious business. I think again, the humanity is going to be reinstated. And today was just a showcase because it was so heartbreaking, but at the same time, it inspired me in a positive way, where it was like, it lit a fire in me that I haven't had since we won the election in November. And I was burnt out at that point. So we're talking about like 2018 after we won the House. It's been a long time since I felt like we're on the right track. We're getting to the truth here, and there's no distractions. And when they tried, they failed miserably, and they were embarrassed off, running off to their cars by whistles. You know what I mean? Like, these are cowards. These are un-American traitors. And they would. The only way to compare them to as a terrorist attack is Bin Laden was Trump. And that's just the fact here. There is no other person they would have gone there for. There is no other person that they would have hit a police officer for. They thought, think about it like this, they thought the president basically ordered them to go there. Yeah. And when they saw broken glass, some of them have told me that, oh, well, I thought the president went in before me. So I was like, of course I can go in and follow. Like, some of them actually were so delusional they thought that. And then they start walking around in a circle. They're like, wait. And it's kind of like their brain wakes up. And then when they get arrested later on, it's like, but I didn't mean to. This guy told me to. And then he acts like, I've never met this person. And I, find people or whatever, but he's not bailing them out.
Yeah. So going back to this Trump testifying thing, because I've put that, personally in the realm of the impossible. You're saying it's likely. What do you put that percentage at?
I think that what could happen is he's implicated in different crimes, and then he would want to try and clear his name. He'd just end up digging himself a bigger hole. So in order for him to testify two things would need to happen. Need to be an enforceable subpoena based on evidence that had been gathered, or he'll have to have been indicted by the DOJ or someone else, and him be then compelled to testify as part of a plea deal or something along those lines. So there's a lot of ways to leverage this to happen. There's no way for it to be based off the New York testimony or whatever, because that's state versus federal. But there's a lot of ways to be creative with this. He's a former president. He's not a current president, and he's not exempt. And the DOJ made that clear that no federal employee is exempt from testifying, and that was crystal clear. And he is a former federal employee.
Interesting.
And so that's what he served as. So I know it seems that way, but like, I would guess that he is criminally implicated before there's a chance for him to testify, and at that point, people won't be interested in what he has to say.
Right, but here's where if history tells us anything, we didn't go after Nixon, we let him off. We didn't go after Reagan with the Iran-Contra. Didn't go after George H.W. Bush and all the shenanigans during the Reagan years. We didn't go after George W. Bush for getting us into Iraq with the aluminum tubes and weapons of mass destruction everywhere. We didn't go after any of that. So history has shown us that we let sleeping dogs lie. We look to the future and not the past. So my fear is that this is another one of those things that, someone like Merrick Garland, who is an institutionalist, can go, we're just going to leave the past and move on, move forward. Am I wrong?
No, we didn't have a lot of things that we have now, and including the resistance and including the organizations that we have now. I mean, they're outnumbered by a vast majority. And I think, especially with January 6th, it's not the same kind of thing. People are dropping off real quickly in regards to this. I mean, Fox News and Newsmax covered it as news today, live. They ran it on air, the testimony, and then they covered it as news afterwards. I was shocked. I was like, they're actually playing like Kinzinger tearing up. They're like they had played the whole thing. I think that this is going to be shocking to a lot of people, how simple some of these answers are going to be, where members of Congress and their staff maybe didn't even surveil for them or take them around the Capitol because they had, a 1,000-piece Lego set. Like, they had a bunch of different models of the Capitol. I'm sure that they have architecture of the Capitol. I mean, this was planned to at least an extent where they wanted to stop lawmakers in some fashion. And you don't carry around those zip ties unless you're trying to take hostages, and that's a coup at that point. No, so I mean, I think that the reality, because of COVID and our isolation that we're still in mostly, I think that contributes to the outrage factor, as in people are not as outraged because it doesn't seem as real. Like, it doesn't seem that January 6th kind of really happened. It seems like a movie. That seems crazy. It can't have been that bad. Oh, it was worse than we could ever imagine. But the worst part about it is it was not just something that came out from thin air. And so I think that you're going to see evidence presented that members of Congress and also members of the White House staff conspired against the United States of America, wanted there to be an attack, and not only that, but encouraged it, helped with the planning of it, helped with the implementing of it, helped with the funding of the rally that they knew they wanted to turn into a riot of some sort. And all you do is you have 10 different barking people at different entry points along the Capitol where, there's a person that basically leads the charge with everybody, and everybody else would just follow. They had people on megaphones in different areas where they're like, go to the middle of the barrier. They knew how to take things down. These are not amateurs. And if we don't figure out as quickly as possible everything that happened and expose that to the world, it's going to happen again. And Harry Dunn, Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn, told me that, that if we don't, this absolutely can happen again if we don't uncover everything that happened and make sure that everyone is held accountable at every level for it. And I know, again, that it's tough for people to see that that's a possibility. But people are the arrest of Tom Barrack is everything I need to see, because that's obstruction of justice, and I mean that's inauguration 2017. So that means they're going probably chronologically. I would not be shocked if people were compelled to testify because they're indicted. I mean, I think that's where we'll see it. But they may already have the evidence, and
let's hope.
Testify.
So last question I've got for you, because obviously today was an emotional and powerful day. Where does this go tomorrow? What's the next step in this?
Well, the next step is to talk to the criminals. You're also going to have, there's a couple different things. One is you can stay down this route where you then talk to staffers, you talk to members of Congress who were threatened about their hiding spaces and what they were doing during the time of. You move into other law enforcement officers like Eugene Goodman and his experiences. You work around people that organize the event. You get them to testify, because at some point it's not going to be the emotional aspect of it and the trauma. It's going to be the criminals that have to testify. And that's where we're going to pummel towards pretty quickly. But first, they're going to want to uncover, people's experiences while they're getting their ducks in a row legally to make sure that they subpoena these people, they're enforceable, or they know that this is not a joke. You have to testify. And I'll just say this: if Hillary Clinton was forced to testify, then absolutely they'll be able to figure out a way to get Republicans to testify, because Hillary had like the best lawyers in the world and whatnot, and she still had to testify. And I think that maybe not Donald right away, but Mike Pence and all the way down. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we need to know what they knew, when they knew it, and all of that. And I'd love to hear what Mike Pence's thoughts on Trump basically throwing him under the bus, and the beloved crowd wanting to hang him in the outdoors. There's so much to this, and as it continues, I hope you'll come back and share some more insight and more thoughts on this. I appreciate the time, Scott.
Sure, thanks, Rick.
Good stuff. Our good friend Scott Dworkin. Seriously, I mean, I want to get to the bottom of this, but the skeptic in me keeps going. Sadly, we're going to end up where we've been multiple times before. Hopeful. I want to see the Donald on the stand, because I wanted to see him try and outsmart everybody. But we'll see. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
More than a month's worth of rainfall in just 24 hours. We could see that again in the coming hours.
London, the latest metropolitan center to be hit by torrential storms and floods. Volatile Middle East grapples with extreme heat, power, and water shortages. Plus,
corners of the so-called first world are getting their first taste of what fossil-fueled wealth could ultimately cost.
New study warns the cost will be very hot and very expensive.
All of those expenses and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
These people are crazy. Whatever happened to cows? Remember they were going to get rid of all the cows? They stopped that. People didn't like that. Remember?
No, actually, I don't remember.
You know why they were going to get rid of all the cows? People will be next. People will be next.
And you say those people are crazy? Sir, this is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, first off, apologies for playing Donald Trump there. But he's back. He's saying nonsense, and I think people should know about it.
Yes, and he is not going away.
Unfortunately, What do you have for us that isn't insane today?
Well, climate scientists have widely expressed shock at the wave of extreme weather events slamming across the northern hemisphere that underscore how nations are not ready for the accelerating impacts of a climate-changed world. After destructive storms and floods in recent weeks hit Germany, Nigeria, Oman, China, and Turkey, over the weekend, a month's worth of torrential rainfall hit famously rainy London, flooding roads and subways and forcing 2 hospitals to close.
A month's worth of rain in 24 hours.
Yep.
Nothing wrong with that at all, I guess.
In Mumbai, India, unusually intense storms caused widespread regional flooding and landslides that killed at least 25. Torrential storms and flooding hit 30 villages in Uganda. In China, officials say last week's rainfall exceeded all records over the past 5,000 years and caused $10 billion in damages in Zhengzhou City alone.
5,000 years.
But it's also extreme heat. Finland just saw 31 consecutive days above 77 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the longest heat wave ever recorded in that country and led to a spike in heat-related illnesses. In North Africa, heat waves have brought unprecedented temperatures topping 122 degrees. But it is absolutely the worst in the Middle East. The New York Times reports that decades of neglect and underinvestment have left the Middle East's rickety electric grid unable to meet demand, plunging homes and businesses from Lebanon to Iran into darkness and stirring unrest. Temperatures in several countries have already topped 122 degrees Fahrenheit, among the highest ever recorded, causing repetitive blackouts. Bloomberg reports that in Iran, the hottest summer in decades has triggered water shortages that in turn are sparking deadly protests as extreme heat waves bring day after day after day of record and near record temperatures.
Wow, just a little preview of what we may be looking at in this country before too long.
And speaking of, new research published Monday in the journal Nature Climate Change warns that record-shattering heat waves, even worse than the one that recently hit the U.S. Pacific Northwest, are likely to become much more common in the near future as the rate of man-made global warming accelerates.
Great.
The study projects that extended extreme heat waves lasting a week or more are likely to hit up to 7 times more frequently over the next 30 years, warning that officials must begin preparing now to adapt to unprecedented extremes rather than relying on data from heat waves of the past.
They won't.
Without major emissions cuts, after 2050, such extreme heat could occur up to 21 times more frequently. Dr. Russell Vose, chief of climate monitoring at NOAA, who was not involved in that study, told CNN,
"The last 7 years have been the warmest on record, and they really stand out from the record that preceded it. In fact, to me, when I look at them, it almost hints at a bit of an acceleration in the rate of warming we're seeing globally. I don't expect 10 years from now that we'll be cooler than we are today. If you're a betting person, it's probably a safe bet to assume we'll be warmer in the future, barring, say, some major volcanic eruption."
What does it say when we are rooting for a volcanic eruption to keep our climate cool?
U.S. officials announced on Monday that Lake Powell, the second largest reservoir in the United States, has fallen to its lowest level on record since it was first filled more than 50 years ago. In California, state regulators warned that thousands of farms will soon be cut off from surface water deliveries because intensifying drought is drying up the state's rivers, threatening the survival of the state's million-dollar salmon industry. Officials say most winter-run Chinook salmon in the Sacramento River are likely to die this year. Finally, some good news. The Biden administration on Monday moved to reverse a major Trump administration regulatory rollback. The EPA started the process of restoring regulations to reduce toxic arsenic, lead, and mercury that pollutes rivers and streams near coal plants across the country.
Some good news amongst a whole bunch of really not good news. For much more on all of these reports and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the big 3 tech giants, Apple, Microsoft, and Alphabet, they own Google, if you didn't know. They reported a combined profit of $50 billion. That's 50 billion with a B. In April, May, and June, the quarter of April, May, and 3 months, $50 billion. The report said, underscoring their unparalleled influence and success at reshaping how we live. And I'm going, no, what's happened is they're not paying taxes on that because they've reshaped our tax codes. So they're able to pocket this. And look, on a certain level, you got to be in awe at their commitment and their ability to make themselves extraordinarily wealthy while saying, well, basically the heck with the rest of us. But $50 billion, that's what they've pocketed. Going to be interesting to see how the next quarter looks. They also reported that the massive profits pouring into these companies illustrate why. They have a combined market value of $6.4 trillion. More than double their value before the pandemic began 16 months ago. Yeah, so if you had Microsoft, Apple, or Google before the pandemic, you're doing all right. But I don't know anybody. I don't know a lot of people who have them. Now, what's interesting is, again, they're gonna probably pay a lower tax rate than people who go to work and punch a clock every day. They're going to get away with, it's our money. And I know there are people out there saying, well, they're successful. They deserve it. And to that, you just go, on a certain level, you got to go, you've drank the Kool-Aid. I don't know where else to go with that. You go back to when the country was great, and I have a lot of, Trump supporters saying, we need to go back when the country was great. And they always point to the Eisenhower years. When the corporate tax rate was 56%. And, oh, by the way, they paid, in the 40s. Now you've got companies at Amazon pay nothing. And it's all about making the rich richer and the powerful more powerful. And I point to this story that was out in the Wall Street Journal last week. They did a story on this guy, Al Lord. I don't think anybody has really heard who Al Lord is. But Al Lord was the former CEO, chief executive of Sallie Mae. Who the hell is Sallie Mae? Well, Fannie and Freddie's sister, of course. No, but Sallie Mae is they're the people who do the student loans. So if you've got a student loan, Aunt Sally. Aunt Sally's all about making more money. And Al Lord is the guy who really, really, really ramped it all up. And this story goes through how just, in 20 years, how they've taken what was supposed to be for the common good, getting students loans so they can invest in themselves, skin in the game. You've heard all the arguments. Get them to pay for college, and hopefully be a little reasonable. Only to find that the cost of tuition, all the way through the roof. And there's this guy saying, look, it was predictable. This is what they knew was going to happen, basically. The article goes into that, it's even hurt him. Trying to make Al Lord the victim here, when he was the guy who really pushed the policies that made people take on, $30, $40, $50, $100,000 in student loan debt. They point out that he had 3 grandchildren. Several years back, he had to pay. One went to the University of Miami. He had to pay $75,000 a year for. The other ones, I guess, went to Penn State, Villanova, Davidson College, all of this. And they said in the article, he had to pay upwards of $200,000 per student. And you go, this is a guy who's worth $300 million. A guy who figured out how to get all of the kids who go to college and take out these loans to kick money into him so that he can have good stock options and a high wage and all that stuff. And what you had was, and this is one of those reasons that I was against student loans. Because what just happened is the more money you can take out on loans, especially an 18 or 19-year-old kid going, hey, it's your only way to get a job, got to go to college. The cost of tuition went through the roof. And it's happened all across the board, especially in the for-profit college models. And, here in Pennsylvania where I'm at, even the state system schools had to raise their tuitions because the state walked away from funding it because they figured, well, Aunt Sally's going to, saddle these kids with student loan debt. And, it's really the only game in town because you're not going to go flip burgers. So the only path to a middle-class existence is got to get a college degree. It's what I was told going to school back in the 80s. There's not going to be any of those factory jobs, those union jobs that built the most prosperous working class in history. Those are gone. We're eviscerating those. It's the knowledge economy. We were told that time and time again. We're going to all get corner offices. We're going to all wear shirts and ties. It's going to be great. We're going to shuffle papers and we're going to do all of this stuff and it's going to be fabulous. No more dirty factories. No more getting your hands dirty. No more taking a shower after work. It's going to be grand. Only to find out that those cubicles that they were stuffing us in were basically little sweatshops, and the jobs that were left after the manufacturing base was shipped south or overseas, poverty wage jobs. So the last option, and I go back to, back in 2011 when Tom Corbett was governor here in Pennsylvania, and they wanted to slash $1 billion from higher education. They wanted to slash it by like 50%. It was outrageous. And I still remember I was getting on the platform ready to speak, and there was a kid I met there. And I was talking to the kid, and we were just talking about, what's your story? Why are you here? And he told the story of his family. He's the first kid who's actually going to college. His grandfather wanted to go to college, but the war came, and then grandma had a kid, and no college for you. And then the father wanted to go to college. Yep, sorry, nothing for you. The end of the Vietnam War hit. He got drafted. A whole bunch of stuff. And then years later, this kid, he said, each time that his grandfather and his father wanted to go back to college, they couldn't afford it, so they ended up back at the mill. They ended up working in the mill and supported their families, had a reasonably and a good life. He said, this kid goes, the sad thing is the mill left. They closed the mill down. There's no mill for me to go back to. This is my only option. And this is what we've told kids. This is your only option. You have to go to college. And I'm telling my own kids the same thing. You've got to go get a degree. You've got to go get a skill. I've been pushing building trades apprenticeship programs because they're one of the best ways to get a good, solid wage job, a good career, and not have a lifetime of debt. So I'm pushing that heavily. But we told kids the only way you're going to be able to live in this country, in this economy, and have a decent life is to take on all of this massive debt. And we've saddled a generation with enormous debt. All because Al Lord and the folks there said, no, what we need is, we need to have skin in the game, and we need to give these loans to children. Kids, 18, 19 years old. I'm sorry. You're not thinking about how am I going to repay this. You're thinking about, hey, I got one option. This is what I have to do. And look, this is a policy problem too. This is Congress's fault as much as it's Al Lord's. This is a state legislature's problem as much as it is Sally Mae, because they began walking away from funding education so that the tuitions kept going up, and the funding for that tuition from state and federal government and local taxes all went away. And where does it go? Onto the back of the students and onto the back of the parents. And look, Congress gave Sally Mae this incredible deal. Give people as much money as they can take. And if they fail to pay it, it's going to be with them forever. They can never default on it. They can never not pay it back. It'll follow them to the grave. And that the federal government will make sure that Sally Mae makes a handsome profit, regardless of students' default. So we're giving these loans to people knowing there's a good possibility a number of them are going to fail. And we, the taxpayers, are going to pick it up. And my mindset is, why don't we just fund it? Because that would sound like socialism. Kind of like, people in their 60s and 70s now enjoyed during their college years. When I threw it out the other day to a guy I know, I said, I took my kid up to Bucknell for this engineering camp that he went to. And my kid loved it. He said, it's a beautiful campus, nice people, incredible. I said, don't get too excited. It's $75,000 a year. And this guy was like, no, it can't be that much. I'm going, it's $75,000 a year. So you're looking at what, 300 grand for a 4-year degree? I don't know many working class folks who are making $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year who can afford to send their kids there. And the thing that gets me is we set up these programs where there's no risk for Sallie Mae to write. They're just writing loans to everybody. And the for-profit college industry jumped into this because, hey, there's opportunity to cash in, because if they're giving free money out, the marauders are going to come in and figure it out, which is why you saw all of these for-profit colleges pop up. Because between Sallie Mae handing people money because, hey, the only way you're going to get a good job is you go to college, and the federal government through the GI Bill funding this stuff, it has been a trough of cash for these education entrepreneurs or thieves, whichever word you want to use. And the thing that's really frustrating is, you have a guy like Lord, who was promoting this kind of debt as an investment. And we've heard this before from everybody. It's an investment in yourself. You're going to get a higher salary. The problem is, no matter how high the salary, you're still not going to be able to pay the debt back, especially when you start tacking out all this interest, which is why I've said the way forward in this is to say, look, we already bought this debt. It's already owned by we the people. Do like we do with some medical debt. Buy it all up, federal government, buy it all back. We own it anyway. Pay it off on even have people pay it back just interest free. So if you took out $100,000, you're going to pay back $100,000, not $300,000 when you add the interest in. That seems like a fair way forward. Or even better yet, say, look, we're going to take a percentage of your salary for the next 10 years. If you make $50,000 a year, we'll take, 1%, 10%, whatever the number is. Still going to be a lot less than what we've screwed this generation over with. I mean, it's really disgusting to me that you have an education system that's set up to profit shareholders and CEOs it's insane. But again, it's what we do. It's what we do with healthcare. It's what we do with education. It's what we do because, well, the people who lobby our representatives, the people who lobby the people who write the laws, they're smart. They're really smart. They figure out how to rig every game so that they profit. And this is just another one of those things where the article by the Wall Street Journal was very sympathetic to Al Lord. I'm not. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1990. That was the day that George H.W. Bush signed into law the Americans with Disabilities Act. The ADA prohibits employment discrimination of people with disabilities and requires public accommodations to be accessible. The passage of the act was the result of years of grassroots organizing by members of the ADA community and their allies. When President Bush signed the law, he said that if he had to thank everyone who had been involved, we'd never get out of here before sunset. The passage of the act had bipartisan support, but many business leaders worried about the ADA's effect, fearing the costs of accessibility accommodations to their bottom lines. While most business leaders did not oppose the act outright, they did push for amendments and concessions to weaken its impact. The business newspaper, the Wall Street Journal, called the act, quote, the Lawyers' Employment Act, warning that a flood of lawsuits on disability issues would harm businesses. In signing the bill, President Bush addressed business leaders specifically. He said, quote, you've called for new sources of workers. Well, many of our fellow citizens with disabilities are unemployed. They want to work, and they can work. And this is a tremendous pool of people. And remember, this is a tremendous pool of people who will bring to jobs diversity, loyalty, proven low turnover rate, and only one request, the chance to prove themselves. The passage of the ADA paved the way for fundamental changes in America's infrastructure, such as accessibility ramps, spots for wheelchairs on buses and subways, and parking accommodations. This was a major step forward, yet more work remains in order to build a society truly accessible to all. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, the CDC is saying that we're on track to see 200,000 daily cases of COVID-19 here within several weeks. And look, I'm in this place where you get the vaccine or you don't. I know there are some people talking about mandates. I'm not a mandate person. I don't ever foresee us holding someone down and forcing them to do it. I know there's, Rich Ojeda we had on the panel last week, a military guy said, look, when I was in the military, you didn't have a choice. You lined up, they jabbed you with stuff, you didn't even know what it was. That's because you're in the military. As my grandfather so eloquently pointed out to me when I was a young man, he said, you know what GI stands for? Government issue. That means you're just another piece of equipment to them. You have no rights. That's a military thing. In society, I don't believe we force people. No, I think you incentivize it. You want people to do what's going to help protect them, help keep them safe, help keep the rest of us safe. But in the end, if we rise up to 200,000 cases a day in states that don't have high vaccination rates, I think that's where we end up having to be. We didn't learn the lessons of the last shutdown because it wasn't bad enough. You go, well, but Rick, 625,000 people died, 650,000 people died. How's that not bad enough? It's not bad enough. It didn't do enough because you've got people saying, well, it was only a small percentage. And they were going to probably die anyway. We should be like Sweden, who just powered through higher death rate. But the people who were left were happier. And we're a selfish country. And look, we're a selfish globe. Humans are selfish to begin with. I just don't see us. I don't see us going to another lockdown, and I certainly don't see mandates going well. Now you have Joe Biden, who evidently on Thursday is going to talk about federal employees and what possibly they're going to try and do there. They're considering a mandate for all federal employees under a VA order, because if you're working with veterans, especially ones who are in a compromised situation, I think you should have the ability to say, look, if you want to work in this environment, you got to be vaccinated. We've got to protect these people. You have rights. Absolutely. and your rights are yours until they infringe on someone else. And I look at the VA situation of you have the right not to get vaccinated, but you don't have the right to work in a place where you can then get someone else sick and cost them their lives. That's where this ends for me. You have the right. You can do what you want until your decision infects the rest of us. And then I think there has to be some accountability. So go on your anti-vax rants. Go on your rants about how all of these mystery things are going to miraculously kill things, like the scientists aren't trying to figure that out. Go ahead. But at the end of it, I don't see us holding people down and sticking them in the arm. I just don't see it. But if we do lose, a percentage of those folks who didn't get vaccinated, doesn't matter to me one bit. I know it's a horrible thing. I know karma will come back and bite me in the behind. But you know what? If you're not willing to protect yourself, that's on you. This is where personal responsibility does mean something. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.